A lot of producers tend to forget the most important thing about making SZA type beats, but that's cool. I got you covered. In this video, I'm teaching you every secret, tip, trick, hack, technique about making SZA type beats that I know, including a little insight that producers tend to forget. A lot of people try to make a beat for SZA and they end up making a modern R&B beat, which is fine because SZA does that amazingly well, but you are not doing justice to the sheer diversity and complexity of her sound. See, when you're making an R&B beat, you're dipping your toes into a genre, taking its inspiration from funk, soul, jazz, disco, gospel, and blues. Later on, hip-hop started being added to the mix and people feel a certain type of way about that, but from 2010 onwards, other genres started being added to the mix, such as electro, dance, EDM, trip-hop, lo-fi, synth-pop, synthwave, retrowave, all of that, to the point where people started calling it alternative R&B. What I'm trying to say is this: when you're making SZA type beats, you need to try and get your inspiration from other genres except for the typical genres that we associate with R&B, because there's a whole lot of things you can do when taking sounds from, say, synth-pop. And if you don't believe me, listen to this beat right here. So I got 3 beats right here that I want to use to teach you everything I know about making SZA type beats. All of the beats are using guitar loops as their basis because the guitar, whether acoustic or electric, is a prominent instrument in SZA's latest album, S.O.S. So we're going to just take our time breaking down those beats. The first thing that I want to tell you, beautiful people, is keep your chord progression simple, or rather don't do the most. There isn't a moment while listening to S.O.S. where I thought, wow, this chord progression is super intricate. It is all very accessible. I mean, look at the chord progression that I got here. It is a B major, it is a G sharp major, it's an E minor, and it's a D sharp minor. It's super easy. I'm not even using the 7th chord. And beautiful people, when I say keep it simple, I really mean keep it simple, to the point where often you're only hearing 2 chords in one chord progression on the beats on S.O.S. And if you don't believe me, listen to this beat right here and how well it works. So that's what I'm saying, beautiful people. In terms of chords for SZA type beats, you don't need a lot. It's cool to go all out, but just know that you can turn little to nothing into something. Cool, so let's talk about the sounds that you can use for a SZA type beat. Here's an easy one: acoustic guitar, like the ones that you hear on Blind or Nobody Gets Me. But if you want to go for an electric guitar, then listen to the song Love Language. You add a little bit of chords to that electric guitar and you get an amazingly smooth sound. And if you don't believe me, listen to this beat right here, where I did exactly that. But a lot of people are probably going to be more interested in the analog kind of sound that you hear on songs like Kill Bill, or more famously, I Hate You. Or if we're taking a previous album, Control, we can look at songs like Doves in the Wind, like The Weeknd, Garden, you know, all of that stuff. So there's a couple of VSTs that I can recommend if you want to get this sound. First of all, you know, there's the obvious V collection, of which the Juno 6 and the Jupiter 8 and other VSTs are amazing to getting that classic analog sound. They even have a Mellotron. Logic Pro X even has a Mellotron, so you can, you know, try your luck there. But try to think about Omnisphere as well. Basically, if you've got Omnisphere, you're set for life. If you've got Pigment, which is not a part of the V collection, you're also set for life. But consider this: if you're a Contact user, try out Retro Machines, or even more famously, 40's very own keys, which is what I use a lot for this beat right here. Now there's a lot of sounds that you can use in SZA type beats from the VSTs that I mentioned, but you're probably going to be looking for leads, bells, plucks, keys, and pads, and strings. Those are the ones that I like to use when, you know, I take out those VSTs. Now, while we're on the subject of strings, I feel that strings are a cool way to make a SZA type beat feel more grand or more ethereal. Now, Me personally, I like to use Augmented Strings Intro or the Selena from the V collection, but any string patch from any VST with a little bit of processing on it will do just fine. So what happens when you put all of that together, a guitar sample and some analog sounds? Well, then you get a cool beat that sounds like this. So let's actually take a look at one of these beats. One of the things that I noticed when listening to S.O.S is that a lot of the beats are not being led by melody, they're actually being led by chords and SZA's ethereal heavenly voice. That doesn't mean that you can get away with not making a melody, it's just that you have to rethink about what it means to add melody or harmony to your beats. And one thing that I did is not go for melodies, but go for accents, single notes that I carefully placed in the beats to really invoke some kind of emotion, which is something that I did in this sample that you're about to hear. Also, beautiful folks, before I forget, layering your samples, your chord progressions gets you a long way. Now, layering doesn't have to be very apparent. It's something super subtle. You can stack 4 layers playing the same chord progression, but it's gonna sound so good, so tight, so strong in the end if you carefully choose your layers. Now, what I like to do, I like to take my guitar layer, I like to add another layer of keys, I like to supplement that with a layer of pads, I want to add another layer of strings to that too, you know, so I get a really cool and cozy wall of sound that really adds to the vibe of the SZA Type beat that I'm making. So enough about the sounds, let's talk about the drums. I'm gonna show you 3 examples of cool things that you can do with drums in a SZA Type beat. And there's one thing that I kinda need y'all's opinion for. So let's talk about the third beat first. So as you can hear, this beat is heavily inspired by Love Language, track number 5 on S.O.S, and it features a drum beat that has a snap as opposed to a clap. But what I'm actually doing is I'm introducing a beat switch to a more 90s Timbaland style groove, which is really what I loved about this beat. So what it means is that if you really want to go for something that's more contemporary R&B, because SZA does that amazingly well, that's kind of the direction you can think in. But when we look to the second beat, you can actually see that I'm going for a more trappy, spaced out drum kind of feel, which I feel that really complemented the fact that the beat is sounding super grand. You know, the space between the kick and the snare allows for a lot of content in between, and I feel that the sound selection does exactly that to fill up the gap. Now, as for the first beat, is actually my favorite beat. All I did was take some inspiration from 80s synth pop, and you know, knowing the fact that retrowave and synthwave are very popular genres at the moment, I decided to go for just that. So I basically took a disco drum kit, not a synthwave drum kit, but a disco drum kit. I added some reverb and processing to my samples, and that's how I got the beat to sound the way it does. But here's the thing, let's go back to the second beat. So I've got those trappy spaced out drums, right? Those kind of Bryson Tiller-ish drums. What you also can do is introduce a drum break, because drum breaks are very prominent in the productions that SZA sings to. You can hear them on Doves in the Wind, you can hear them on Kill Bill, you can hear them on, wow, I forgot what the name was of that song with Travis Scott, but drum breaks, you know, especially the ones with a lot of lo-fi effects on them, you know, to change the textures, are very prominent and very popular in SZA Type beats, so you can definitely use that. So I want y'all's opinion, because for the second beat, do you prefer the trappy style drums, or do you prefer it with the drum break that you're about to hear right now? There's nothing that I can teach you about processing, but there are a couple of processing plugins that you need to have in your repertoire when making SZA type beats. First of all, you definitely should be having some kind of a lo-fi plugin, whether that's Tape Mellify by Arturia, whether that's Origins by Cymatics, which I like to use because it's pretty accessible, whether that's RC20 or whatever, or something by Audio Thing. It's all good as long as it allows you to degrade the texture. On top of that, you should definitely have a combination of chorus, reverb, and flanger. Any kind of modulation effects will get you a long way when processing your sounds for SZA type beats. I definitely feel you should have a reverb and a delay, and especially the ones that are more creative, like the ones by Valhalla DSP, Supermassive, that kind of stuff. Creative effects will definitely get you a long way in getting a unique sound for your SZA type beats. Me personally, I like to use Spaced Out by Baby Audio. That always does the trick, but I'm also very partial to Crystallizer by Soundtoys. And beautiful people, last but not least, I love me some Outputs Portal on my effects. That granular synthesis effects, it's perfect. It really gets you a unique jittery sound, but I'm also a big fan of Shaperbox by Cable Guys because it allows me so much control over the time, the volume, the shaper, the pan, all of that good stuff. So we've talked about keeping our chords simple and accessible. We've talked about the fact that you don't need to do the most. You're free to do the most, but it's all good if you want to keep it simple in your chords. We've talked about the sounds that you can use, guitars and strings, and the analog sounds from either the V Collection or Omnisphere or Retro Machines or 40's very own keys, which I love to use. And we talked about the diverse things that you can do with your drums, whether it's breaks, whether it's stuff from synth pop or synth wave, whether it's a more trappy style drums, or whether it's a Timbaland 90s groove or a more contemporary R&B groove. In summary, beautiful people, I hope that I've told you everything that I know about making SZA type beats, but the most important tip that I can give you is look outside of the confines of funk, soul, jazz, blues, gospel, hip hop, and the other genre that I kind of forgot to mention. So, beautiful folks, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I got much love for y'all checking out all of my videos, and I hope to see y'all back in the next. Now go and make some SZA type beats. Peace.